Captain Jake Morrison stood at the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Centauri Prime was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in space. The station was bigger than Earth's moon, made of shining metal and crystal that caught the light from 3 different suns. Ships from dozens of alien species moved around it like busy insects. Jake had been to this place many times in the past 15 years, but it still made him feel small. The human ship looked tiny next to the giant vessels of other species. The Vorthak warships were dark and covered in armor like metal lizards. The Zephyrian trade ships glowed with bright energy that hurt to look at directly. Even the smallest alien ships were 3 times bigger than the Defiance. "Captain," said Lieutenant Maria Santos from her station, "we're getting a docking assignment. Bay 47 in the outer ring." Jake nodded. The outer ring was where they always put human ships. It was the cheapest, oldest part of the station, far from the important areas where real business happened. The alien species with power got the inner bays, close to the council chambers and the fancy hotels. The docking process took 2 hours. Human ships had to wait in line behind everyone else. When a Vorthak cruiser needed the same space lane, the traffic controllers told Jake to move aside and wait. This happened every time, but Jake never got used to the feeling in his stomach. When they treated humans like children who needed to learn patience. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez was already waiting in the shuttle bay when Jake arrived. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. 15 years of dealing with alien politics had worn her down, but she never gave up trying to make things better for humanity. "How bad is it this time?" Jake asked as they walked toward the diplomatic shuttle. Lisa shook her head. "The Vorthak want 3 more of our colonies, New Denver, Port Hope, and the mining station at Kepler 442. They say humans are too dangerous to live so close to important trade routes." "Dangerous?" Jake almost laughed. "We barely have 20 ships that can fight. Most of our colonies don't even have weapons." "That's not how they see it," Lisa said. "They think humans breed too fast and take up too much space." The council agrees with them. The shuttle trip to the council chambers took 30 minutes. Jake had made this trip hundreds of times, but he still felt nervous every time. The council chamber was huge, with seats arranged in rings going up toward the ceiling. The most powerful species sat at the top, in chairs made of gold and precious stones. The Vorthak Empire had the biggest section, with red banners showing, their symbol of a sword through a planet. Humans sat at the very bottom in a small section with only 12 seats. Their chairs were made of simple metal and there were no decorations. Every other species in the chamber looked down at them, literally and in every other way. Admiral Danny Carter was already in his seat when they arrived. He was the highest, ranking military officer that humans were allowed to send to these meetings. The man looked calm, but Jake could see the anger in his eyes. Danny had been fighting for human rights in this chamber for 10 years, and he was tired of losing every single battle. The session began when a deep voice echoed through the chamber. "The Galactic Council will hear the proposal from the Vorthak Empire." Commander Kyle Adams stood up from the Vorthak section. He was 7 feet tall and covered in natural armor that looked like dark green metal. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together when he spoke. "Honored Council," Kyle said. "The Vorthak Empire brings serious concerns about the human expansion in Sector 7. These young creatures have established colonies and systems that are too close to our trade routes. Their primitive technology creates dangerous radiation that threatens our ships." Jake felt his hands make fists. He had been to those colonies. They were small farming communities with barely enough technology to grow food and communicate with Earth. The radiation Kyle talked about came from simple communication dishes that every species in the galaxy used. Kyle continued his speech. "The Empire proposes that these human settlements be relocated to safer areas, away from important galactic infrastructure. We have prepared suitable locations in the Outer Rim territories, where they can learn to be better galactic citizens." The Outer Rim territories were dead systems with no resources and no trade routes. They were basically prisons where species went to die slowly. Lisa stood up from the human section. "Honored Council, these colonies represent the homes of over 2 million human beings. Families have lived there for 3 generations. We have legal settlement rights granted by this very council 15 years ago. A sound like wind chimes came from the Zephyrian section. It was their way of laughing. One of their energy beings spoke in a voice like music, but the words were cold. Legal rights for young species are conditional on good behavior. Humans have shown they cannot manage their expansion responsibly. What expansion? Admiral Carter stood up, his voice louder than it should be in the formal chamber. We have 23 colonies total. The Vorthak Empire has over 3,000 worlds. The Zephyrians control entire sectors of space. We're asking to keep 3 small farming worlds. The Altarian Chancellor, a tall being that looked like a walking tree made of silver, spoke from the highest tier. Admiral Carter, please remember proper council protocol. Young species should speak only when questions are directed to them. Jake watched Danny's face turn red, but the Admiral sat down. This was how it always went. Humans could speak, but only when the older species allowed it. They could present their case, but the decision was always made before they entered the room. The vote was quick. 47 species voted to approve the Vorthak proposal. Only humans voted against it. 12 votes out of thousands. The human colonies in the designated systems will be relocated within 30 standard days, the Chancellor announced. The Vorthak Empire will provide transportation assistance. Lisa tried to speak again. Honored Council, 30 days is not enough time to move 2 million people. We need at least 6 months to arrange proper housing and transportation. Kyle Adams made a sound like a growling dog. Young species must learn that the galaxy does not wait for their convenience. 30 days is generous. The session ended with the formal closing ceremony. Species filed out of the chamber in order of importance. Humans left last as always. In the corridor outside, Jake found Lisa and Danny talking in quiet, angry voices. 2 million people, Lisa was saying. How do we move 2 million people in 30 days? We don't have enough ships. We don't have anywhere to put them. We'll find a way, Danny said, but his voice didn't sound confident. We always do. Jake thought about Commander Helen Brooks, who ran the defense force on New Denver. She had sent him messages about the families there. Children who had never seen Earth, who thought New Denver was the whole universe. Grandparents who had spent their life savings to travel to a new world where their families could be safe and free. In 30 days, all of that would be gone. Admiral, Jake said, what if we refuse? Danny looked at him with sad eyes. Then they send the Vorthak fleet to make sure we leave, and the Council will declare us a hostile species. Then we lose everything, not just 3 colonies. They walked back to their ships in silence. Around them, the station hummed with the business of 1,000 different species. Traders making deals worth more money than Earth's entire economy. Military officers planning operations across dozens of star systems. Scientists sharing discoveries that could change the galaxy. And humans walking quietly to their small ship. In the cheap docking bay, trying to figure out how to save their people from becoming refugees in their own galaxy. Jake looked back at the council chamber one more time before they reached the shuttle. Somewhere in that huge room, decisions were being made about the future of the galaxy. Important decisions about trade routes and territorial disputes and scientific discoveries. But none of those decisions included asking what humans wanted, or cared about what happened to human families when their homes were taken away. For 15 years, humanity had tried to be good galactic citizens. They followed the rules, paid their taxes, and accepted whatever the council decided. They had been patient and polite and grateful for whatever scraps they were allowed to have. Jake wondered how long that patience would last. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Phillips walked through the refugee camp on Luna Base, trying not to show his anger on his face. 6 months had passed since the forced relocations began, and the temporary shelters were still packed with families who had lost everything. The camp was supposed to house 5,000 people for a few weeks while new homes were found. Instead, it held 23,000 refugees, and more arrived every day. The metal buildings were cold and crowded. Children cried at night because they missed their real homes. Parents stared at walls because they had no work and no hope. stopped at the medical center where Dr. Michelle Turner was checking on a sick child. The little girl was maybe 6 years old, thin and pale. Her mother held her hand and spoke in whispers. "How many more today?" Ryan asked quietly. Michelle looked up from her patient, her face tired and sad. 12 new cases of depression, 4 attempted suicides. The Morrison family from New Denver hasn't spoken to anyone in 3 weeks. What about the kids? They're the worst. They don't understand why they can't go home. They ask me every day when they can see their friends again, when they can play in their old backyards. Michelle's voice cracked a little. I don't know what to tell them. Ryan nodded and continued his walk through the camp. These people had been farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and mechanics. They had built lives on distant worlds, raised families, and created communities. Now they lived in metal boxes and ate food from machines. 3 days later, Ryan was in a meeting with Earth's leadership when the next crisis began. President Amanda Foster sat at the head of the table, looking at reports from across human space. General Patricia Wells was reading intelligence data that Agent Tony Valdez had gathered from sources throughout the galaxy. The Vorthak are moving again, Patricia said. They're claiming that our mining operations in the Tau City system are causing environmental damage. They want us to stop all industrial work and let them supervise our activities. President Foster rubbed her temples. What kind of environmental damage? The kind that doesn't exist, Tony said from his seat. I've been watching their communications. This is part of a larger plan. They're systematically targeting every human settlement that has any economic value. They're not just taking our homes, Patricia added. They're trying to break our spirit, force us to become completely dependent on their approval for everything. The meeting was interrupted by an emergency communication. Admiral Danny Carter's face appeared on the main screen and he looked worried. We have a problem, Danny said without greeting. Captain Morrison's supply run to the refugee camps has been intercepted by a Vorthak patrol fleet. They're demanding to inspect his cargo. President Foster leaned forward. What's in the cargo? Medical supplies, food, and basic communication, equipment for the camps. Nothing that violates any galactic regulations. Then why are they stopping him? Danny's expression grew darker. Because they can. The screen switched to show the bridge of the UES Defiance. Captain Jake Morrison stood facing a huge Vorthak warrior who had obviously boarded his ship. The alien was even bigger than the ones they had seen in the council chamber, with more scars on his armor and meaner eyes. I am Commander Kyle Adams of the Vorthak 3rd Fleet, the alien said in his grinding voice. This vessel will submit to immediate inspection under Galactic Safety Protocol 847. Jake's voice stayed calm, but everyone watching could see the tension in his shoulders. Commander, we're carrying humanitarian supplies to refugee camps. Everything in our cargo is listed in our manifest and approved by the Galactic Trade Authority. Kyle made a sound like metal scraping stone. Young species often misunderstand what is approved and what is restricted. We will determine what is safe for you to transport. For the next 2 hours, Earth's leadership watched as Vorthak soldiers went through every container on Jake's ship. They took half the medical supplies, claiming they contained potentially dangerous technology. They confiscated the communication equipment, saying it could be used for unauthorized military coordination. They even took food packets, stating that some of the ingredients were not suitable for human consumption. When they were finished, Kyle looked directly into the camera. Young species must learn that survival in the galaxy requires proper supervision. We do this for your own protection. After the Vorthak left, Jake's voice came through the speakers, quiet and controlled. Admiral, they took 60% of our supplies. The camps are already running low on medicine and food. President Foster turned off the communication and looked around the table. How many camps are we running now? 47 refugee camps across 12 different locations, Ryan answered. Population total is just over 1 million people. And they're all depending on supply runs like Morrison's? Yes, ma'am. We don't have enough ships to carry everything they need, and now the Vorthak are taking whatever they want from our cargo. 2 weeks later, the situation got worse. Captain Susan Drake sent an emergency message from the Proxima Centauri colony. Her voice was tight with worry when she appeared on the communication screen. Earth Command, we have a crisis here. The Vorthak have established a blockade around our planet. They're not letting any ships through, including medical supply runs. Admiral Carter leaned forward. What's their justification? They claim we're conducting illegal mining operations. We're not mining anything. We're farmers and researchers, but they say they need to investigate our activities before they can allow supply ships to reach us. How long do you have? Susan looked away from the camera for a moment, checking something off screen. Our food reserves will last maybe 3 weeks. Medical supplies are already running low. We have 200 children in the colony, and 15 of them are in the hospital right now. The transmission switched to show the inside of the colony's medical center. Mayor Betty Clark walked slowly between beds filled with sick children. Some were coughing, others were too weak to sit up. The doctors and nurses looked exhausted. These kids are sick because we can't get the medicine they need, Betty said to the camera. Simple things like antibiotics and vitamins. Stuff that would cost almost nothing if we could just get a supply ship through the blockade. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the colony's head doctor, appeared beside her. We're seeing diseases that were eliminated on Earth over a century ago. Scurvy, rickets, infections that should be easily treatable. Without medical supplies, we're going to start losing children. The transmission ended, leaving Earth's leadership sitting in silence. Agent Tony Valdez broke the quiet by placing a datapad on the table. I've been tracking Vorthak communications for the past 6 months. This isn't random harassment. It's a coordinated campaign. He activated a holographic display showing human colonies throughout the galaxy. Red markers appeared over each settlement, with dates and details of Vorthak interference. They're hitting us systematically, Tony continued. First, they force relocations to break up our established communities. Then they interfere with supply lines to create shortages in medical emergencies. Finally, they offer to help, but only if we accept their permanent supervision. General Patricia Wells studied the display. It's a slow-motion conquest. They're not invading us with armies. They're making us so desperate that we'll surrender just to survive. President Foster stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of the Luna refugee camps. Thousands of people living in temporary shelters that had become permanent prisons. What are our options? She asked without turning around. Diplomatically, we can file protests with the Galactic Council, Admiral Carter said. But we know how that will go. Militarily, we have 43 ships that can fight, maybe. The Vorthak Empire has over 8,000 combat vessels. And if we fight them, the entire Galactic Council will declare us a hostile species. Amanda turned back to face the room. So we do nothing. We let them starve our children and destroy our communities. We try to buy time, Danny said. Keep negotiating, keep filing protests, keep hoping something changes. The meeting was interrupted by another emergency communication. This time it was from the edge of human space where Captain Alex Murphy commanded the science vessel Discovery. Earth Command, we're picking up a distress signal from the refugee transport New Horizon. They're reporting critical system failures. Life support is failing, and they have 50,000 people on board. The room went quiet. Everyone knew the New Horizon. It was one of the big ships carrying refugees from the latest relocations. 50,000 people, mostly families with children. What's their status? President Foster asked. They're 3 days from the nearest human vessel, which is us. But we're a science ship. We don't have the equipment to repair their life support systems. What about Vorthak ships in the area? There's a patrol fleet 2 hours away, but you know they won't help. Without proper authorization forms, Amanda looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. For 15 years they had followed the rules. They had been patient and diplomatic and grateful for whatever scraps they were allowed to have. They had watched their people be pushed around and treated like children, and now 50,000 human beings were going to die because the galaxy's most powerful species couldn't be bothered to fill out paperwork. Captain Susan Drake stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the warning lights flash red across every control panel. The ship was dying around her, and she had 50,000 people depending on her to keep them alive. Engineering report. she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez looked up from his station, sweat dripping down his face. Main life support is down to 30%. Backup systems are failing one by one. We're losing atmosphere, faster than we can replace it. Dr. Kevin Walsh's voice came through the communication system from the medical bay. Captain, we're already seeing effects from the air quality problems. Children and elderly people are having trouble breathing. We need those repair parts now, or we're going to start losing people. Susan looked at the main screen where the stars looked back at her with cold indifference. Somewhere out there was help, but it was too far away. The nearest human ship was Captain Alex Murphy's Discovery, 3 days away at maximum speed. 3 days they didn't have. What about the Vorthak patrol? She asked her communications officer. Lieutenant Gary Nelson shook his head. They're still there, 2 hours away, but they're demanding we submit proper emergency assistance forms before they'll even consider helping us. How long do those forms take to process? Minimum of 48 hours, assuming they're filled out correctly the first time. Susan felt something cold settle in her stomach. 48 hours to process paperwork, while 50,000 people slowly suffocated. It was like watching someone drown while being told you needed a swimming permit to throw them a rope. On Earth, President Amanda Foster sat in the Emergency Command Center deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The room was full of military officers and government officials, all watching the same terrible countdown. The New Horizon had maybe 14 hours of breathable air left. Status report, Amanda said to the room. Admiral Danny Carter stepped forward. The Discovery is still 3 days out. We've contacted every human vessel in the sector, but none of them are close enough to help. The Vorthak patrol fleet could reach them in 2 hours, but they're refusing to respond without proper authorization. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from Centauri Prime. I've filed an emergency petition with the Galactic Council. I'm requesting immediate authorization for the Vorthak to provide assistance. How long for an answer? The Council is scheduled to meet in 36 hours. If we're lucky, they might move it up to 24 hours. Amanda looked at the clock on the wall. 24 hours was 6 hours too late. The Council would debate and discuss and follow proper procedures while 50,000 human beings died waiting for help. General Patricia Wells stepped up to the President's side. Ma'am, we need to discuss our options. What options? We don't have any ships close enough to help. Patricia looked around the room, then leaned closer to Amanda. We need to talk privately. The two women walked into a smaller room connected to the command center. Patricia closed the door and activated the privacy shields that would prevent anyone from listening to their conversation. Ma'am, there's something you need to know. Something we've been working on for the past 5 years. Amanda felt her heart skip. What are you talking about? The Ares Protocol. It's a contingency plan we developed after the first forced relocations. We knew this day would come eventually. Patricia activated a wall screen and entered a series of codes. The display showed star charts, but not the ones Amanda recognized from normal military briefings. These showed hidden facilities, secret construction sites, and ship movements that weren't supposed to exist. We've been building, Patricia said quietly. Ships, weapons, bases, all in secret, all off the official records. We've been preparing for the day when being polite and following the rules wasn't enough to keep our people alive. Amanda stared at the screen. How many ships? 237 combat vessels, fully equipped and ready for action, plus support ships, supply vessels, and mobile repair facilities. Where? Hidden bases throughout the outer system, old asteroid mines, abandoned research stations, places no one looks because they're too far from the trade routes. Amanda felt like the floor was moving under her feet. The budget for something like this would be enormous. How did you hide it? We didn't use government funds, private donations, corporate investments, off-the-books research projects. A lot of people have been quietly preparing for this day. The President looked at the star charts again. Who else knows about this? Admiral Carter, myself, and about 200 officers and engineers. Everyone who's been working on the project knows they're preparing for something, but most don't know the full scope. Amanda walked to the window, looking out at the Earth. Below, For 15 years, she had tried to be the kind of leader who solved problems with words instead of weapons. She had believed that patience and diplomacy would eventually earn humanity respect in the galaxy. What are you asking me to do? Activate the Ares Protocol. Send our real fleet to save the New Horizon. Show the galaxy that humanity isn't as weak as they think we are. And start a war? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, the war already started. The Vorthak have been attacking us for months. They just haven't been using bullets. They're destroying our communities, starving our children, and letting our people die. The only difference is that we haven't been fighting back, Amanda thought, about the refugee camps, the sick children on Proxima Centauri, and the 50,000 people slowly running out of air on the New Horizon. She thought about 15 years of being patted on the head and told to be patient while her people suffered. If we do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. Maybe that's a good thing, Patricia said softly. Maybe it's time they stopped seeing us as children who need protection and started seeing us as equals who demand respect. Amanda closed her eyes and made the decision that would change everything. Activate the Ares Protocol. Within minutes, coded messages went out to secret facilities across the solar system. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid belts and outer planet moons began powering up their engines. Officers who had been training for this moment their entire careers received new orders. Captain Jake Morrison was in his quarters on the Defiance when the message arrived. 3 simple words that changed everything. The sleeping giant awakens. Jake felt his hands shake as he read the message. After 15 years of being pushed around, after watching his people suffer while he could do nothing, he finally had permission to fight back. He walked to his bridge and found Chief Engineer Maria Santos already there waiting for him. Captain, we've received activation codes for the special modifications. Jake nodded. For months, his ship had been carrying extra cargo that he wasn't allowed to talk about. Equipment that was supposed to be scientific instruments but looked more like weapons. Systems that were labeled as communication gear but felt like something much more dangerous. Begin the installation process, Jake ordered. Throughout human space, the same thing was happening on dozens of ships. Merchant vessels that had been carrying hidden weapons began revealing their true nature. Science ships activated military-grade sensors and shields. Even some of the refugee transports started showing defensive systems that shouldn't have existed. On the New Horizon, Captain Susan Drake received a message that made her heart skip. New Horizon, this is Admiral Tom Bradley of the UES Retribution. We are en route to your position. Estimated arrival in 2 hours. Susan had never heard of Admiral Bradley or the UES Retribution. According to her records, there was no human ship by that name, but the message included authentication codes that were definitely real. Admiral Bradley, this is Captain Drake. Are you sure about your arrival time? The nearest human vessel is 3 days away. Captain, you're about to learn that there are a lot of things about human capabilities that aren't in the official records. Maintain life support as long as possible. Help is coming. 2 hours later, the New Horizon sensors detected incoming ships. But these weren't the small, unarmed vessels that the galaxy was used to seeing from humanity. These were warships, bigger and more advanced than anything in the official human fleet. The lead ship, the UES Retribution, was twice the size of anything humans were supposed to have. It moved with a grace and speed that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. Behind it came a fleet of smaller vessels, all displaying military configurations that violated every treaty humanity had signed. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Tom Bradley looked at the Vorthak patrol ships that had been ignoring the New Horizon's distress calls. The alien vessels were powerful, feared throughout the galaxy for their advanced weapons and heavy armor. Communications, open a channel to the Vorthak fleet, Bradley ordered. Channel open, sir. Bradley's voice went out across all frequencies, calm and clear. Vorthak vessels, this is Admiral Bradley of the United Earth Fleet. We are conducting a rescue operation. Stand clear. The response came quickly, full of the arrogance that humans had learned to expect. Unknown human vessel, you are operating in violation of galactic law. Submit to inspection immediately or be destroyed. Bradley looked at his tactical officer. Weapon status? All systems ready, sir. The Vorthak commander, Kyle Adams, had destroyed over 100 enemy ships in his 30 years of service. He had conquered entire star systems and made alien species surrender with just the sight of his fleet. When he looked at the human ships, approaching the new horizon, he expected to add another easy victory to his record. All ships attack formation, Kyle ordered his fleet. Show these humans the price of disrespecting the Vorthak Empire. His 8 warships moved into their standard battle pattern, the same formation that had terrified the galaxy for centuries. Heavy armor in front, plasma cannons charging, shields at maximum power. It was a formation that had never failed against any enemy. Admiral Tom Bradley watched the Vorthak ships move into position from the Bridge of the Retribution. His tactical officer, Commander Peter Torres, was tracking their movements on the main screen. Admiral, they're using formation Delta 7, standard Vorthak heavy assault pattern. Weaknesses? Their ships are tough, but they're slow to turn. They rely on overwhelming firepower rather than speed or maneuverability. They expect enemies to either run away or try to match their firepower directly. Bradley nodded. The Vorthak had been using the same tactics for so long that they had forgotten how to fight enemies who thought differently. Captain Lisa Wong, are your fighters ready? Fighters are ready, sir, waiting for your signal. Begin Operation Hornet's Nest. What happened next changed everything the galaxy thought they knew about human warfare. Instead of forming up for a traditional fleet battle, the human ships split apart and moved in directions that made no sense to the Vorthak commanders. Captain Lisa Wong's fighter squadron launched from hidden bays in the larger ships. But these weren't normal fighters. They were small, fast, and moved in ways that should have been impossible. They spun and twisted through space like dancers, avoiding the Vorthak weapons with ease. Kyle Adams watched in confusion as the tiny, human ships darted between his massive cruisers. What are they doing? Why aren't they fighting properly? His question was answered when the fighters reached the rear of his formation. Instead of firing weapons, they attached small devices to his ship's hulls. Within seconds, the devices activated and began interfering with the Vorthak systems. Commander, we're losing sensor contact with the enemy fleet, his tactical officer reported. Something is jamming our targeting systems. Use manual targeting, Kyle snarled. Sir, the jamming is affecting our manual systems too. Our weapons can't lock onto the human ships. While the Vorthak fleet struggled with their malfunctioning systems, Admiral Bradley's ships moved into position. But instead of attacking the armored fronts of the enemy vessels, they targeted weak points that the Vorthak had never thought to protect. Commander Peter Torres had spent years studying Vorthak ship designs. He knew exactly where their power systems were located, where their shields were weakest, and how to disable their weapons without destroying the entire ship. Target the power coupling on Ship 3, Torres ordered his weapons team. Precision strike, minimal damage. The human weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of massive plasma cannons designed to smash through heavy armor, they used focused energy beams that could cut through specific systems with surgical precision. The first Vorthak ship lost power and drifted helplessly in space. The second ship lost its weapons. The third ship's engines shut down, leaving it unable to maneuver. Kyle Adams realized with growing horror that his mighty fleet was being taken apart piece by piece, and his ships couldn't even fight back effectively. All ships retreat to safe distance, he ordered. We need to regroup and analyze their tactics. But the human ships didn't let them retreat. They followed the Vorthak vessels, continuing to disable their systems while staying just out of range of the few weapons that were still working. Within 20 minutes, the entire Vorthak patrol fleet was floating dead in space, their crews alive, but their ships powerless. Admiral Bradley opened a communication channel to Kyle's flagship. Commander Adams, your ships are disabled, but your crews are unharmed. Consider this a lesson in the difference between cruelty and efficiency. Kyle's voice shook with rage and disbelief. How? How did you defeat our ship so easily? Because you've been fighting the same way for centuries, Bradley replied calmly. You forgot that there might be other ways to win a battle. While the rescue fleet saved the 50,000 people on the New Horizon, news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. The Vorthak Empire's finest patrol fleet had been defeated by humans without a single shot being fired at their hulls. On Centauri Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Altarian Chancellor's silver face showed confusion and concern as he called the meeting to order. This council has received disturbing reports of human military action in the Kepler sector. Ambassador Rodriguez, please explain your species' unprovoked aggression. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez stood up from the human section, but she wasn't alone anymore. Admiral Danny Carter stood beside her, wearing a military uniform that looked different from his usual diplomatic clothing. This uniform was pure black with silver trim, and it carried symbols that no one in the council had ever seen before. "Honored Council," Lisa said, "I would like to introduce Admiral Danny Carter, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force." The council chamber erupted in surprised voices. Everyone had thought Danny was just a military advisor with limited authority. Nobody had realized he was the head of humanity's real military. Danny stepped forward and his voice carried clearly through the chamber. "For 15 years, this council has treated humanity like children who needed protection. You've taken our homes, ignored our rights, and let our people die while you debated paperwork." "Admiral Carter," the Chancellor interrupted, "you will explain why human forces attacked Vorthak ships without authorization." "We didn't attack them," Danny replied. "We disabled them. Every Vorthak crew member is alive and unharmed. We could have destroyed their entire fleet, but we chose not to." The Vorthak representative, a general named Korax, stood up from his section. "You dare claim mercy after this humiliation? Your primitive ships somehow managed to disable our fleet through trickery and deception." Danny looked directly at General Korax. "Primitive? General, your ships use the same weapons and tactics your empire developed 300 years ago. You've been so successful for so long that you stopped innovating, stopped learning, stopped growing. And humans have been learning," Admiral Carter continued. "We've been watching, studying, and preparing. Every time you dismissed us as too young and primitive to understand, we were taking notes." Danny activated a holographic projector that filled the center of the council chamber with tactical displays. The images showed human ships and weapons that looked nothing like the small, weak vessels the council was used to seeing. "These are some of our capabilities," Danny said. "Not all of them. Not even most of them. Just enough to make a point." The displays showed ships that were larger and more advanced than anything in the official human fleet. Weapons that could disable enemy vessels without destroying them. Defense systems that could make human ships nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. "Impossible," breathed the Zephyrian trade representative. "Our intelligence reports show that humans have only 43 combat vessels." "Your intelligence reports show what we wanted you to see," Danny replied. "We've been building our real fleet in secret for 5 years. Every time you forced us to relocate a colony, every time you ignored our rights, every time you let our people suffer, we added more ships to our hidden fleet." General Korax's voice was full of rage. "How many ships do you really have?" Danny smiled, and it was the same kind of smile Admiral Bradley had shown during the battle. "Enough." The council chamber fell silent. For 15 years, they had been making decisions about humanity based on incomplete information. They had treated humans like a weak, helpless species, while humanity quietly built a fleet that could challenge any empire in the galaxy. "What do you want?" the Chancellor asked quietly. "Respect," Danny said simply. "We want to be treated as equals, not as children. We want our rights honored, not ignored. We want our people to be safe from those who think weakness is an invitation to abuse." Danny looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of different species. "We tried diplomacy. We tried patience. We tried following your rules and hoping you would eventually treat us fairly. That approach failed. So now we try a different approach. From this moment forward, any species that threatens human colonies, interferes with human ships, or harms human citizens will discover that humanity is no longer defenseless." The crystalline hierarchy representative, a being made of living crystal, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "Are you threatening the entire galaxy?" "No," Danny replied. We're promising the galaxy that we will defend ourselves. For too long you've confused our patience with weakness. Today you learned the difference. Danny turned toward the Vorthax section. General Corax, your empire has 3 days to withdraw all forces from human space and return the territories you've taken from our colonies. If you don't, you'll discover that disabled ships was just us being polite. General Corax of the Vorthak Empire thought Admiral Carter was bluffing. 3 days seemed like plenty of time to organize a proper military response to humanity's threats. The Vorthak had thousands of ships, experienced commanders, and weapons that had conquered half the galaxy. Corax called an emergency meeting with his war council on the Vorthak homeworld. The massive fortress where they met had stood for 1,000 years, its walls covered with the flags of conquered species. The general expected to add humanity's flag to that collection very soon. These humans think they can frighten us with a few hidden ships, Corax told his officers. We will show them the true power of the Vorthak Empire. Admiral Vex, the Empire's strategic commander, pointed to a holographic map of Vorthak space. We have 47 fleets positioned throughout our territory. Even if the humans have more ships than they showed us, they cannot match our numbers. What about their tactics? Asked General Thane, who had studied the battle reports from Kyle Adams' defeated patrol. Tricks and surprises, Corax dismissed. They caught Kyle off guard because he wasn't expecting resistance. Now we know to be ready for their deception. Corax was wrong about everything. The war that followed wasn't like any conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships didn't gather into massive fleets for traditional battles. Instead, they appeared everywhere at once, striking targets that seemed random but were actually carefully chosen. Captain Jake Morrison led a small squadron that hit Vorthak supply depots throughout their empire. But they didn't destroy the facilities. Instead, they planted devices that made the automated systems malfunction. Food shipments went to the wrong planets. Ammunition was delivered to bases that didn't need it. Fuel was sent to ships that weren't ready to use it. Within a week, the Vorthak military machine was choking on its own confusion. Commander Peter Torres specialized in cyber warfare, something the Vorthak had never encountered before. His team infiltrated the enemy's communication networks and began sending false orders to their fleets. Vorthak ships received commands to move to positions where no enemies waited, while real human forces struck targets that had been left undefended. Captain. Lisa Wong's fighter squadrons hit Vorthak shipping lanes, but they didn't attack the cargo ships directly. Instead, they disabled the navigation systems, leaving the vessels stranded in empty space. The crews were unharmed, but the supplies they carried never reached their destinations. The Vorthak Empire found itself fighting an enemy that refused to fight by the established rules. Human forces avoided direct confrontation whenever possible, preferring to attack the systems that kept the Vorthak military functioning. After 2 weeks of increasing chaos, the crystalline hierarchy sent a main eye message to Earth requesting a meeting. The crystalline beings were some of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, and they recognized that something fundamental had changed. President Amanda Foster met with the crystalline ambassador, a being called Resonance, in a secure conference room on Luna Base. The crystalline entity's body caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns as it spoke. President Foster, the crystalline hierarchy wishes to understand humanity's intentions. Your military actions suggest capabilities that far exceed our previous assessments. Amanda looked directly at the alien ambassador. Our intentions are simple. We want to be treated as equals, not as children who need supervision. The Vorthak Empire claims you are the aggressors in this conflict. The Vorthak Empire has been forcing our people from their homes for months, Amanda replied. They let 50,000 refugees nearly die in space rather than provide basic humanitarian aid. They've blockaded our colonies and stolen our supplies. If defending ourselves makes us aggressors, then perhaps the galaxy needs to reconsider what aggression means. Resonance's crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it processed this information. Show us your evidence. Agent Tony Valdez had been preparing for this moment. He activated a holographic display that filled the room with communications, intercepts, video recordings, and documented incidents of Vorthak harassment over the past year. The evidence was overwhelming. Message after message showed Vorthak commanders discussing how to break human morale and force complete submission. Video recordings showed Vorthak soldiers taking humanitarian supplies while human children went hungry. Financial records revealed a systematic campaign to destroy human economic independence. This is disturbing, Resonance admitted. The crystalline hierarchy was not aware of the scope of Vorthak actions against your species. The Galactic Council knew, Amanda said quietly. Every incident was reported through proper channels. Every abuse was documented and filed, and every time, we were told to be patient and trust that the galaxy would protect us. Resonance was silent for a long moment, its crystalline body shifting through different colors. What are your terms for ending this conflict? Complete Vorthak withdrawal from all human territories, return of all confiscated supplies and equipment, reparations for the families who lost their homes and livelihoods, and formal recognition that humanity has the right to defend itself without asking permission from the Council. And if these terms are rejected? Amanda's expression hardened. Then the galaxy will learn exactly how creative humans can be when we're forced to fight for our survival. The turning point came when Captain Morrison's intelligence team made a discovery that changed everything. While infiltrating Vorthak communication networks, they found classified files that revealed the Empire's long-term plans. The documents showed that humanity wasn't the Vorthak's only target. Over the next 50 years, they planned to systematically conquer or subjugate 12 other species, using the same tactics they had employed against humans. Tony Valdez brought the files to Admiral Carter, who immediately understood their significance. They're not just trying to destroy us. We're the test case for conquering everyone else. Danny made a decision that shocked even his own officers. Instead of keeping the intelligence secret, he broadcast it across the entire galaxy on open communication channels. Every species, every government, every civilian with access to galactic news networks saw the Vorthak Empire's plans for galactic domination. The reaction was immediate and decisive. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium, realizing they were on the Vorthak target list, quietly began providing supplies to human forces. The Altarian Council announced they were withdrawing support for Vorthak territorial claims. Even species that had been neutral began reconsidering their positions. General Corax watched his Empire's alliance network collapse in real time. Species that had been loyal for centuries suddenly found reasons to distance themselves from Vorthak policies. Trade agreements were canceled. Military cooperation treaties were suspended. Diplomatic relations grew cold overnight. Within a month, the Vorthak Empire found itself isolated and facing not just human resistance, but growing opposition from across the galaxy. The final confrontation came when Admiral Tom Bradley's fleet appeared at Vorthak Prime, the Empire's capital world. But the human ships didn't come to destroy the planet. They came to deliver an ultimatum. Bradley's message was broadcast to the entire planet and relayed throughout Vorthak space. Citizens of the Vorthak Empire, your leaders have spent years planning the conquest and subjugation of peaceful species throughout the galaxy. These plans included the systematic destruction of human civilization as a test for larger campaigns. The holographic displays showed excerpts from the classified documents, proving beyond doubt that the Vorthak military had been planning aggressive wars against multiple species. Your government has refused all reasonable attempts at negotiation, Bradley continued. They have chosen conflict over diplomacy, conquest over coexistence. The choice now is yours. General Corax appeared on the communication channel, his armored face twisted with rage. You dare threaten our homeworld? We will fight to the last, warrior, before we surrender to primitive humans. Bradley's expression remained calm. General, look at your tactical displays. Count the ships surrounding your planet. Then remember that these represent only a fraction of humanity's actual fleet. For the first time, Corax looked at his sensor readings with real attention. The human fleet was enormous, far larger than anything the intelligence reports had suggested. Ships that had been hidden for years were finally revealing themselves. Impossible, Corax whispered. General, your empire controlled 3,000 worlds when this conflict began, Bradley said. How many do you control now? Korax checked his strategic reports and felt his heart sink. Vorthak forces had been forced to withdraw from over half their territories. Local populations, emboldened by humanity's success, had begun uprising against their occupiers. The empire was collapsing from within. "What do you want?" Korax asked, his voice no longer full of rage. "Withdraw all Vorthak forces to your original territory before your expansion began. Release all subjugated species. Pay reparations to the peoples you've harmed, and never again mistake patience for weakness." The surrender came 3 days later. The Vorthak Empire, reduced to a fraction of its former size, signed the Treaty of Seoul that established new principles for galactic civilization. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez stood at the central podium of the Galactic Council chamber.